Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt, joined now by the former Secretary of State for the United States, the Honorable Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning, Hugh. It's great to be back on with you this morning.
I followed your lead and endorsed Dave McCormick after studying up. It's going to be a recount. I hope he wins the recount, and I'm sure you'll be up there stomping for whoever won. I also wanted to thank you, as I did Governor Christie, for your work on the redistricting trust. Looks like the Republicans came through this okay.
You know, Hugh, it was great work with Governor Christie. We actually got some really good outcomes. We crushed Obama and Holder and their team that had been running wild for 2 decades. Really good news. It'll make a difference in the House of Representatives, and most importantly, it'll make a difference that people actually get represented by the folks that they want to represent them. All good stuff.
All good stuff. And I want to now get to Taiwan, Russia, and Iran. But before I do that, your comments on the massacre in Texas. I know you and Susan are great Christian people, and your hearts break for these folks. Immediately, people went to their corners and began throwing bricks. Beto O'Rourke's stunt just made my stomach churn. But what's your comment on that, Mr. Secretary?
Oh, goodness. It's absolutely tragic. We continue to pray. We'll continue to pray for the families, for sure, and for the entire community. This will be something that a small community like that is impacted by for years and years and years. It's so heartbreaking to see, as you said. We shouldn't go to our corners. We should do the things we can do. There are some tactical things one can do on the ground, right? We've heard different ideas. We should investigate them all. Layered defenses at schools, kind of like we did when you were a small unit leader in the United States military, right? First the locks of the doors, then awareness, situation awareness in the rooms. There's lots of things one can do that reduce risk. Never all goes away. One big comment, though, is I do think we can see, not just in these school shootings, but in what's happening in our inner cities all across America, we can see that families matter, and the deterioration of families impacts not only crime, but so many things across our nation. These civic institutions that matter so much, our churches, our synagogues, our mosques, all have a big impact too. When you walk away from those things, when you begin to lose the traditions of the United States of America, then you start to see things fray in ways that you see fray in countries that nobody wants our country to be compared to.
Now, Mr. Secretary, I want to talk to you first about what the president said in Japan. Standing next to the Prime Minister of Japan, asked a direct question, will we defend Taiwan if the Chinese Communist Party attacks it? He said yes. That's the third time he said yes. It's the third time unnamed White House sources walked it back, adding ambiguity where we don't need any ambiguity. What do you make of this? It's just bad, I think, for the United States, but what does former Secretary of State think?
It's confounding and dangerous, Hugh. We all know that this president is saying things that aren't connected to the actual policies of the United States. That in its own right is deeply dangerous. Then to watch his team walk back out, try and fix it. If you're this Japanese prime minister standing there with it, you don't know what to make of that. If you're the South Koreans, the Vietnamese, the Australians, our partners in the Pacific Islands, you have no earthly idea what U.S. policy is with respect to Taiwan, not to mention if you're the president of Taiwan or a human being living there. I don't think you have any idea what the United States policy is. And that is deeply dangerous. We need to be clear. Even if our clarity is a bit ambiguous intentionally, what we don't know is what the intentions are for the United States of America today with respect to supporting the Taiwanese people. So all we can turn to is deeds, not words, Hugh, because you can't make sense of the muddle from what they've said. The deeds need to reflect that Taiwan is, in fact, a sovereign, independent nation. We should support them with all the tools they need to do, much as the Ukrainians have done, and defend their own nation. I know that they'll fight. I know that they'll do that. And when we provide those, then the world will see that America is serious about helping Taiwan protect its own nation state.
Now, Secretary Pompeo, Secretary Esper, one of your colleagues in the cabinet, had come out with a book that I'm not going to read it, but I read the reports about his rather confusing stances on naval power. And you're an Army guy. I think we need to get the Navy up. The current administration is simply flummoxed on this as well. When we say defend Taiwan, does that mean more ships, more weapons to Taiwan? What's in your mind? Because you know these people that they're up against, and you know they're Taiwanese.
Absolutely. It means capability to defend their ports and harbors. Equipment in and around ports and harbors. It means air defense systems. It means intelligence and communication systems, too. One of the things we were slow to provide the Ukrainians was the ability to know what their adversary was doing. This is different. That means that the United States should go out and build a real no BS Navy. I almost said a bad word on your ear this morning, Hugh. We need to go build a Navy that is fit for purpose in the Pacific today to meet the threats that are in front of us today. Frankly, we didn't get this done in the Trump administration. We began to turn the tide, to begin to put the resources against the problem in a way that was serious. But I know our U.S. Navy needs those tools. Our Space Force needs its tools too. Think cyber as well. All of those things are the way that we will confront, at least as a kinetic and military matter, confront the Chinese Communist Party. When we do that, get the economics right, Taiwan's got a real shot. And most importantly, freedom and democracy, and people who want simple sovereignty for countries around the world will have a shot as well.
Now, I've talked with you before about the decision by Putin to invade Ukraine. You're a tank guy, though. I'm sure you saw them trying to cross the river with pontoons and tanks and being destroyed by artillery provided by NATO allies. What is your prognosis? What do you think is going to happen there? And is there an exit strategy for Putin?
Oh, goodness. No, this is going to... You're seeing the end in one sense, right, Hugh? We're seeing how this plays out. That's not because of anything that the Ukrainians have done, but because of Vladimir Putin's long-term intentions. The destruction of the Russian army has been something to witness. No one could have predicted that, I don't think. I certainly know Vladimir Putin, the person who would have known his own forces best, couldn't have predicted it. But he's not going to change his ways. His mission set to expand Russia. I think Peter the Great, I think a lot of history with the Soviet Union. There's no doubt Vladimir Putin's intentions aren't going to change. And so this conflict goes on. And whether there's a momentary slowdown or a temporary ceasefire, Vladimir Putin's mission set to expand Russia won't change, and so you're going to continue to see this conflict, and it requires the West, mostly Europe, but America as well, to actually establish real deterrent that convinces Vladimir Putin that kinetic actions, military action, is just going to be too costly for him. We haven't done that yet. You look at the ruble today. I haven't checked it this morning, but it's as strong as it was before he invaded Ukraine. That demonstrates that the sanctions that have been put in place aren't remotely serious.
Mr. Secretary, you're one of the few Americans who've dealt face-to-face with President Erdogan of Turkey. He has objected to Sweden and Finland joining NATO. I'm sure you're in favor of Sweden and Finland joining NATO. Tell us about President Erdogan and what you expect and what the advice you would give to Secretary Blinken about bringing him around.
I think Erdogan will come to see that being the sole holdout to deny these two nations their entrance into NATO is not in his own personal best interest or Turkey's best interest as well. So I think they'll ultimately get there. Look, he's frustrated. I get it. And some of these frustrations are valid. Some of the terrorism that has taken place, Turkey, are legitimate critiques where NATO hasn't come to the defense of one of its partners in a sufficient way. We should do everything we can. I worked on this with their intelligence minister, a fellow named Hakan Fidan, with my counterpart, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, who was the foreign minister there, to try and work with the Turks to provide them support for their legitimate defensive needs. But some of the claims Erdogan makes are just crazy. They're not factually based. We shouldn't honor those. And when we do that, when we get that mix right, I'm convinced that President Erdogan will come to see it's right for these folks to come in. I hope that that's so. It would be important for America. They'd be two good partners. And it's really important for them and for greater NATO because, as you can see, Hugh, when you're in the mushy middle, when it's not clear, this harkens back to Taiwan as well. When you're in the mushy middle, when you don't, and our adversaries don't know precisely what it is will happen to them if they begin to invade another nation's sovereignty. When a weak American leader comes along, they'll do what Southwest Airlines talked about for so long. They will begin to move about the cabin. And that is dangerous for the United States of America.
Well said. All right, now can I close with Iran? The Metternich of MSNBC, Ben Rhodes, has a new book out explaining again why we have to be nice to Iran. We have leaked classified data the Israelis gave us about an attack in Tehran on a terrorist operating outside using Quds forces. What is it with this gang and Iran? Now, both the Obama years and now the Biden years, they are trying to woo a terrorist state that doesn't want to be wooed and can't say it. I mean, just read what they say.
It's unexplainable to me. I actually was just in Albania. I met with some of the Iranian resistance. Amazing stories of people inside Iran. Even as we were on the show this morning, people inside of Iran protesting, demanding their basic rights. They're being punished by the Iranian internal security forces. I cannot for the life of me figure out why this administration thinks that providing billions of dollars to the Iranian regime is in America's best interest. At its core, that's what they're doing. The nuclear deal is a silly joke, right? It might slow the Iranians down for a month or 6 months or 2 years, But it's Chuck. What they're going to do is they're going to lift sanctions and allow the Iranian regime to have billions of dollars more wealth, and they will use that for terror. The answer to what's the common thread? The common thread is it's the same cast of characters. It's Wendy Sherman. It's Ben Rhodes from the outside now pitching in. It's Robert Malley. It's the same gang who did the deal in 2015. And I think they felt personally affronted when we withdrew from it, but we had done the right thing. It saddens me. We had Iran down from $96 billion of foreign exchange reserves to as little as less than $5 billion. They were on the cusp of having to make some really difficult decisions, and now we haven't lifted the sanctions, Hugh, but you know this story. If you don't enforce sanctions, you may as well lift them. It's the same effect. Sanctions without enforcement are meaningless, and we've already stopped, essentially, enforcing most of the Iranian sanctions on their crude oil shipments, and they are wealthier today. Their GDP grew faster than ours did over the last 12 months. That is tragically dangerous for our nation-state friend, Israel. It's bad for the Middle East and our Gulf state partners there as well. And it's really bad for the American people because this increases the risk that someday something really difficult will happen in the Middle East and we may have to send our boys and girls to fight. This is tragic.
Secretary Pompeo, last question. CAVPAC is out there working. I think you have a pretty good record of backing candidates. A lot of veterans are out there. Is CAVPAC doing what you wanted it to do?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun and important and effective. CAVPAC was created for the sole purpose of making sure that in the election in 2022, we crush those folks who don't want to build a strong military, want to build a woke military, for those leaders who are prepared to go do the right things every day for America. We've endorsed some amazing, talented candidates. We've had a pretty good record so far. But most importantly, I think in those marginal races, the races that matter most to you, we've used the resources CAVPAC has to deliver the winning margin to great Americans. And I'm proud of that. A lot more work to do between here and November, and CAVPAC will be hard at it.
I hope everyone listening goes over to cavpac.org. Cavpac.org becomes a pipe hitter. I've got so many different things. Secretary Pompeo, I call you director, I can call you Secretary Mike.
You can call me Mike, too.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our best to Susan, and
yes,
safe travels.
Thank you. Have a good morning.
Thank you.